Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to this session of GETDigital. My name is Theo Lynn. I'm Professor of Digital Business here at DCU Business School, and I'm the Associate Dean for Strategic Projects. I'm delighted to be the MC for this session, and I think we're hitting on probably session number 32 or 33 this week. And I'm delighted to introduce our speaker, Evan Fishkin, one of the partners at Logic Inboun, and he'll be giving us a deep dive into SEO. I've known Evan and the Fishkin family for over 10 years now, and I can safely say that SEO is in their blood. So I think Evan's presentation is going to be great. And if you have any questions, please post them through the Q&A. So just for the audience, we'd love to get your questions. There's a Q&A button, and please be aware that we've disabled the chat function. So only use the Q&A option. And we'll compile the questions and we'll ask Evan to address as many as he can in the time that we have left at the end. So looking forward to those questions, and please remember to use that Q&A function. So with no further delay, I'll hand you over to Evan.
Thank you so much, Theo. Let's see, I should have a screen going. It looks like I've also got automatic subtitles going from the new Microsoft PowerPoint mode, so hopefully that won't be too disruptive for folks. So welcome to a deep dive into SEO. And before I raise your expectations too significantly, I will say SEO is a massive discipline with over 20 years of history, and I am not going to cover 20 years in 30 minutes. However, a little learning is a dangerous thing. So let's get dangerous. The first thing I'd like to start with is talking about what we're actually referring to when we talk about the search engine optimization. Is we are referring to addressing the search engine market as it is. And currently that is entirely Google. It would be fair to say that I would love to talk about optimization for Bing. If you are in one of the specific markets where Baidu, Yandex, or Yahoo is a more prominent player, you should know that they do have different ranking factors, and there are things you should research to become more specific towards them. That being said, Google is definitely ahead of the curve on most of their ranking factors and their processes. So if you're working towards Google, you're likely working towards one of the other search engines. Now, the other thing you need to know is that not all searches result in clicks. Some of you may have attended the AMA yesterday with myself and Ian Booth and Martin Hennig, and we talked about something called zero click. And zero click is about 65% of all searches. Specifically, a zero click is when a search occurs and no interaction is taken on the search engine result page, meaning they didn't go to an organic result, they didn't go to a paid result, they went nowhere and or performed another search. Now, you're going to ask why? That's a great question. The answer is most search engine result pages now give answers, not results. So what's a search feature? Well, it's a long list, so get ready to take notes. We're going to dive in. First up is the featured snippet, and the featured snippet is specifically this item here on the page. In fact, you'll even see that Google talks about it, and you can learn more about featured snippets. So how do you get a featured snippet? Specifically, you create content that's crafted to answer specific questions. How do you find questions to answer? You should consult with your users, your team, ask yourself what questions you want to know, and when it's safe to do so, ask people on the street. There are also two exceptional resources that you can check out. One is Answer the Public, and the other is Help a Reporter Out, also referred to sometimes as HARO. Both of these communities have a ton of questions that are on the topics or on the top of mind for large communities and industries at large. And if you see a question posted there, odds are good you could create content that would address it and ultimately rank and earn search traffic for it. The people also ask feature. So that's this large section right here. And you'll see that there's also drop downs and collapse for this. And each of these is actually a featured result into itself. Featured snippet into itself. They're just in a bulk view. They are determined based on popular searches about an entity and or a subject, as well as sometimes the follow-up searches that users typically perform directly after the given search. So how can you change the questions listed is really your only option. And it is possible to manipulate these suggestions by getting a lot of users to input your target variation over a long period of time. We used to call this Google bombing. Some of you may be familiar with the term. I don't know what the kids are calling it nowadays. Next up is the knowledge card and the knowledge panel. So this is for the COVID vaccine. This specific left side only occurs right now because of it. It is obviously the first time they've had a major pandemic in Google's history, in our history, in my personal history with the internet. And so this is a unique experience. But the rest of these are all knowledge card results. They are the most difficult to acquire as they are actually created physically by Google to assign data and information about a factual popular entity. Person, place, or thing would be a good way to think about it. They're most frequently populated from trusted sources. I say trusted sources, including government agencies, nonprofit organizations, educational institutions, and Wikipedia, which I know would be contentious for some of us. And then there's the Maps pack. So how do you get into the Maps pack is actually very simple, but it does have some requirements. First and foremost, you have to have an actual place of business, a store, an office, a hanged shingle, so to speak. And then you have to have a Google My Business listing. GMB is the acronym for that. Well, actually, initialism. And Google My Business is a free platform. It is offered by Google and available to anyone. All you have to do is follow the instructions. You just go in, sign up, and away you go. Now, getting to the top of the Maps pack and showing up in one of these top three, that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where you have to learn about local SEO. We're not going to have time to cover that today. It's going to be a very intricate education into itself. And so I highly recommend that you check out moz.com, learn SEO local. This is also a link available, and the deck, I believe, will be shared, or you can reach out to me and I'll share this to you. Next up is the local feature knowledge card version. So it has pretty much the same inputs, but a different output. This is again controlled by Google My Business information, but appears in a different format when it's an entity related search as opposed to a general search. Next up is the events page. So these event cards actually require that a user indicate both a place and a specific time. So they have to self-identify a location and time. And in order to get your event listed here, you have to use structured data. Structured data would be anything related to schema markup, as well as some of the other JSON manipulation that can be done. Job cards. Again, fantastic use of structured data is necessary in order to enable this. You'd have to do it on your own site, or much simpler and much easier for jobs cards, you could in fact just get posted on some of the more popular platforms like Glassdoor and LinkedIn. And then there's the enhanced site links, which are these 6 links down here. Sometimes they show in packs of 4, sometimes they show in packs of 8. These are automatically, again, populated by Google, mostly from the robot. So it's not a manual curation, and you can attempt to remove the pages that show in the list by manipulating indexability. And we'll cover indexability later. Next up is the image pack. So this occurs anytime Google believes there's a user intent for specific media results over traditional web pages. In order to get your image to appear in the Maps pack, you really have to rank somewhere between 3 to 12 in terms of position in images search, which is its own separate vertical. And so if you can rank their positions 3 to 12, odds are good that you will appear when there is a media intent for some searches. Next up is the recipe cards. Now, these again require that you have a specific search against a recipe or ingredients for a known dish or a popular dish. You could potentially try and create a new dish out of nothing and start working on the branding for it, and then work towards having that recipe card appear. This again requires including things like structured data markup in your code, again, specifically the recipe schema. And you can also benefit from using Google AMP, which is the Accelerated Mobile Project. Although this is going away soon, Google is deprecating it, so I wouldn't overly invest yourself on it. If it's something you can do easily, it may be interesting to look at. Now, would you like to see as many of these thrown together as you possibly can? The answer, of course, is yes. Of course, you'd love to see the Google feature smorgasbord. And so here it is. We've got an event. We've got images, we've got top stories, we've got site links, we've got people also ask, and we've got an entity card with localized information. This is about as feature rich as you can get. And again, very easy to do these. Any generic broad entity search will result in this. And so it's starting to make sense suddenly how 65% of all searches result in a 0-click. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You may not earn traffic, but if you can get into one of these Google features, you could potentially earn brand recognition. While you may not appear with your strong logo or a strong brand identity, if people continuously see your name associated with these feature areas, you'll get that brand recognition. So we've talked about some of the broad issues at the SERP. Now let's talk about doing SEO. From my end of it, there are 3 cores of SEO. I like to bucket them into content, technical, and link building. Content and technical are what I consider foundational. They're the pieces you have to have right in order to rank for a target query. Specifically with content, you have to have relevant content. And the site has to be navigable. It has to load quickly, and this has to be for both users and Google. And it's difficult to juggle optimizing for both. And you have to have few, if any, technical errors. Now, if you have 2 websites with good content and solid technical optimization, which site ranks first will come down to links. So let's start talking about content. For content optimization, you are constantly working towards one singular goal: be the most relevant information for the user. Now, let's talk about what to write and how to write. You've probably seen in some form or another, write for the user, not for Google. And what this alludes to is that Google is evaluating content on 3 qualities, and they actually have what are called manual reviewers doing this process. They have expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness as the 3 qualities, and they refer to it as EAT, or the Page Quality Raters Guidelines. And to have good content, in order for your content to be high quality, it must address these 3 qualities. It's really that simple. I know a lot of people will say it has to do with keyword density. It has to do with this headline. It has to do with this format. It has to be with a listicle. It has to be a roundup. No, it has to be demonstrative of expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. If you can achieve that in any unexpected format, then the answer is you have great content, and it is that simple. So what qualifies as content? And the answer is text, images, audio, and video, often called multimedia across the board. If it's on the page, it's probably content. So how do you optimize this content? Well, let's start with what to optimize: the specific titles, tags, and other things. So for those that are the actual ranking factors, we're referring to the title tag, the headline, the body text, the URL, and the image alternate text. Now, you may be familiar with headline in terms of things like H1, H2, or headers. This is basically just an HTML markup to identify the outline of a page. So however you refer to headlines, that's what that is. Now, not ranking factors, but still important. Meta description, schema markup, formatting, including bolding, italics, and other things like that. And so, of course, what do you mean still important? Well, we've talked about the SERP features using schema and structured data. Google uses that to better understand and classify the content. It's not actually a ranking factor. So on their back end, they're getting all of this information from you about things are a recipe or they are an event, and this is venue information, and this is the time, and this is the place. That information is being used to classify. It's not being used to rank. And so it doesn't actually increase the potential for you to rank for specific keywords, but it does help them to make better use of your content. Now, meta descriptions are another great example of this, right? Not a ranking factor, but still important. The description tag is used as the text that appears on the SERP. Again, not a ranking factor, but that's massive, massive impact. You'll want to make that text as clickbait as possible, while of course maintaining your dignity. Now that we know some of the factors, what do we actually put in there? And now I welcome you to the wonderful world of keyword research. This is where I probably spend a majority of my time, but we're going to go through kind of an initial version of keyword research and where you can get some great data today. My recommendation is to review your keyword data in Google Search Console. If you haven't already set up Google Search Console, I beg you, do it. It is free. It is not cumbersome to do. It is typically verified either through code on page or through your hosting provider. Okay, so now that everyone's got Google Search Console, we're going to mosey over to what's called the performance report. So this is a quick screenshot of what it should look like when you log in once you've completed verification. And I've also listed out some of the data in the performance report that we're about to see. We're going to see clicks, impression data, click-through rate, and the average position, also known as your average rank. And all of it is going to be by query level. Now, another important warning is that Google Search Console contains sampled data. It's not comprehensive, which is to say that you may see sampling as low as some people have claimed 15% of total data. The way that they claim that is they review their analytics account, they review their performance report in Search Console, and they say, I'm seeing 100 clicks in analytics, but only 15 in Search Console. So it can be very small. That being said, it's the only place to get keyword level data anymore, which is awesome because this data has not been available at this granular a level for a long time. And even recently, Google Search Console got an update to increase the filtration that you can do. So you can even better report on how you're performing for keywords over time, and you can better filter down to review that information. So this is where I would start, is taking a look at these keyword level reports. And you can then compare that against ranking pages. Now, you can also, again, activate this filter to do specific queries looking at the top pages for that query. So you can see that performance over time for as far back as 16 months. That's basically a year in some, which is hugely valuable, because if you can see a page's performance for a keyword over time, and especially in something like Google Search Console, which is reporting a more accurate average position for you than potentially a rank tracker that you're paying for, you can continue to see what things are impacting your ranking and when your efforts have impact. You can also do the reverse, which is you could filter to a page and see what queries it's relevant for. This, in my opinion, is the most valuable keyword research you can start with. This can help you to identify low-hanging fruit. Use it to inform your content strategy. If you go through each page on your website and you identify at least one keyword that you can optimize for, you'll have something that you can start with today that is actionable information. Now, of course, it's time for the golden rule of keyword research. When you're selecting keywords, always pick keywords that make money. You may see a vanity keyword that is related to your industry where you say, I think that this broad term is super important. I think that we should absolutely rank for it. I want to be number one. But don't forget, 65% of all searches now result in 0 clicks. And the majority of that is broad terms. That is to say, 1 or 2 keyword searches. Those are typically done by users who are not informed. They're not ready to purchase. Those are not the keywords you want to go after for quick wins. They may be great for, again, brand recognition and for high in the sales funnel opportunities, but not where you want to spend your time on today. Next up, we're going to talk about technical. There is so much that falls under technical, but the short version is your website should be fast and functional. Now let's talk about what to optimize for technical. On the left, we've got our ranking factors. On the right, we've got our not ranking factors, but critical, and our not ranking factors, but still important. So for the ranking factors, we have the cumulative layout shift and the largest contentful paint. And I'm going to start talking about those two independently because they are basically what is called core web vitals. If you're following SEO, you've likely heard about core web vitals. It is a new ranking factor that Google will be using going forward. It is effectively a growth or a maturity of page speed ranking factors. Cumulative layout shift talks about how much of the design element of your page shifts after the initial load. So if you've ever gone on your mobile device to a website and you see that the menu continues to move even after the page is technically done loading, or if you see that an image continues to scale differently or text keeps filling in after the initial load, that is CLS. And initially, I think Google wants you to be under 0.25 seconds of CLS, which means your page has to load almost perfectly the first time on the initial load without any shift after less than 1/4 of a second. So that's pretty intense. The next is largest contentful paint, which basically means how much of your page loads in an amount of time. So under about 4 seconds and then under 2 seconds are the two major ranking factor breakpoints for LCP. You want to have as much of the content of your site displayed in that initial 2 seconds and then 4 seconds. If you can get that, your LCP score will be super high. And then page speed is even still on top of that. So while these two new factors are part of page speed, speed in and of itself for the total load time of your page is still being reviewed as well. Next up is internal links, and we'll talk more about that later with the flow of PageRank. And then architecture and navigation. It's always critical that every page on your site be accessible from somewhere between 3 to 4 clicks. If you have to go deeper than that, your content is considered buried and is probably not receiving a significant amount of page rank from things like your homepage or other super category pages that typically earn the most link power. Not ranking factors, but critical, is indexability. I'm sure you've heard about things like the no index tag, the robots tag. Canonicalization technically falls under that, but we'll talk about that in a second. Indexability is anything that would change the opportunity for Google to crawl a page and then index it. A 404 page can be indexable if it's just a 404 content, but you return a 200 status code. Now, status codes are a whole other conversation, but basically there are a lot of errors that fall under this. The not ranking factors, but still important. The robots.txt and the XML sitemaps are kind of just informative pieces to tell Google where things are and how they should be treated. They're not by any means used as ranking factors, and they're also not actually used as definitive methods of informing Google what you want to do. The robots.txt is actually being discontinued by Google continuously over the years. The XML sitemap is really more of like a checklist. You can create one and provide it to Google, and inside of Search Console, they'll tell you what aspects of the sitemap they've completely crawled, indexed, and reviewed, and that it's basically a great checklist for you to say, I am expecting this much content to be in the index, but Google is only indexing X amount. Go figure out what the problems are that causes the disconnect, and that's a great way to get that information back. Canonicalization is really about just managing duplicate content. That's the only purpose of the canonical tag, but a lot of people use it for other reasons and in other methodologies. If you are using the canonical tag for any other intent than to self-canonical, which is to say every page should point to itself as its own canonical, it is the original page, it should be. Or if you do actually have duplicate content for user experience reasons, then of course your canonical tag should point to the original source. But in the event that you are using it for another reason, I would say stop doing that. There is probably a better way to solve whatever issue you're trying to use the canonical tag for. Now, all hail the new Core Web Vitals. But of course, there is good news. The secret to these factors is in Google Search Console. So the same as last time, there is a great report straight on the left side of Google Search Console when you log in and have this verified. If you click into it, you'll see a report that looks like this on the right side, and you'll be able to click into the mobile report and the desktop report. Now, I've highlighted the mobile report, and that is because Google has moved to what they call the mobile first index. That is to say, they are evaluating sites on its mobile performance before they're evaluating sites on their desktop performance. So while you may have a great desktop experience, if your mobile experience is poor, you're not receiving good credit and you're not going to have an improved ranking. Now, once you go into that mobile first experience, this is the kind of information that you're going to see. So the CLS issue and the LCP issue, and they'll tell you exactly which URLs have problems, how many have similar errors, and what that average CLS is that you're currently scoring. You can go in and learn more about what the CLS is and what Google would like you to do about it. And they even have resources on their web.dev website that talk about how to improve page speed and address Core Web Vitals. GSE is generally just a great resource for getting information on your technical errors, and I highly recommend you keep a stern eye on it. It is, however, relatively limited, and you should be proactive in finding and fixing errors. You should review your site regularly, following every update that you make to it, and at least once a month if you're not doing regular changes. Next up, we're moving into link building. So at this stage, we need to talk about links. Links are traditionally that blue underlined text that leads you to another page. In code, they appear as the ahref with a URL and an anchor text. The URL is the destination. The anchor text is that funny blue underlined text. They are important because of a major piece of Google's algorithm called PageRank. PageRank is commonly compared with voting. In voting, a candidate earns votes and the one with the most wins. This is pretty much an easy way of comparing PageRank. Each person has one vote. More votes is a winner. However, there are differences. Unlike voting, PageRank is logarithmic. So while you may earn more physical votes, if those votes are not from higher value individuals, in this case, if I were to earn votes from google.com or ebay.com, they would be significantly more valuable than if I earned them from GE or General Mills. This is that logarithmic scale. And of course, it means that as you earn links, regardless of who you're earning them from, it becomes more difficult to earn and move up the scale. Next up is it also prioritizes diversity. So one of the things that's important to note about PageRank is that it only passes a function of itself. So each page starts with a small innate amount and then sends out a smaller portion of that PageRank. So if a page earns a lot of PageRank from a lot of links, then it has a lot more that it can send out. And so you want to diversify where you're earning links from, as opposed to constantly getting links from the exact same domain. Once you've earned a link from a domain, move on. It's better to find a new domain to work towards than it is to just keep hitting the same one over and over again. You could potentially build thousands of Facebook profiles to try and manipulate and earn a lot of links, but the first one is the one that's really going to give you the most value. After that, you're really just diluting your values. And it also evaluates the content, right? So the anchor text is really that key piece of how PageRank evaluates what it's going to apply that credit towards. This is why links were the #1 ranking factor. For a lot of people, they probably still are. But that being said, I now prefer to think of links as part of authority. I say now, but we've likely been doing this for about 10 years. So just FYI. Now, authority around the industry is measured in a lot of different ways. These are some of the most popular, or at least the ones that I come across the most. They're referenced in client calls, they're referenced in sales calls, they're referenced at conferences. SEMrush has the authority score, Moz has their page authority and domain authority, Ahref has their page rating and domain rating system, and each one has its own quirks and algorithms that they're using to try and guesstimate and get as close to possible to understanding Google's PageRank algorithm and reflecting that back in the data that they have. Now, when you talk to other SEOs and agencies, et cetera, there's a good chance that they'll just talk about links. It's old school, it's outdated, and to just think in terms of links. The algorithm for PageRank has grown significantly to include things like brand mentions, cited content, and sentiment analysis. In fact, Google's patent that talks about this is what they refer to as implied links. And all of these either already are or will soon be part of that implied links factor. So just because somebody's talking about you and you don't have a link from them, that's not necessarily a detriment. Back in the day, we used to say unlinked brand mentions are a golden opportunity. Go out, find those people, get them to link to you. The story is relatively the same. You can go out and do that, but I would say it's more valuable to earn brand mentions in places that you haven't before. In my opinion, they're likely equal weight to traditional links, or it's very likely that they're acting as modifiers of the original link value in PageRank. In this way, however, links are still the strength metric of Google's algorithm. So you have to do link building to compete. Now, this is where I usually get, wait a minute, I was told that link building is A, dead, or B, bad, or C, illegal. Is it dead? I genuinely wish link building was dead. It is the worst activity. Links are still one of the highest correlated ranking factors in every published study. Are they bad? Some links are bad, some links are good. We'll get into what changes the situation there. And then there's illegal. You're referring to the Webmaster guidelines. Yes. Well, let's preface this next conversation with the guidelines are not a legal document, and I am not a lawyer. This is going to be my best interpretation of those guidelines as I can to help you understand them. That being said, I'm going to use their exact terminology. So according to Google's Webmaster guidelines, you must avoid the following techniques. Chief among them is participating in link schemes. This is where a lot of confusion about link building comes from. Google defines a link scheme as any links intended to manipulate PageRank or a site's ranking in Google search results may be considered part of a link scheme and therefore a violation of Google's Webmaster guidelines. So I went into their exact examples to take a look at what they really think is a link scheme. So buying or selling links that pass PageRank. This includes exchanging money for links or posts that contain links, exchanging goods or services, or sending someone a quote unquote free product. I think of that as basically saying you're sending them a product with the understanding of they are going to give you a link for it. Effectively, I think that falls under the second category of exchanging goods or services. But they've called it out as a specific example because clearly people were attempting to undercut that by using the free product experience. Excessive link exchanges. Now, here I've redded the excessive term, which is to say a lot of people still are hesitant about doing link exchanges if they're knowledgeable. And they'll say things like, oh, link exchanges or link trades, those are bad. Those are absolutely against the guidelines. Not true. Excessive link exchanges is what they're referring to. So if you're constantly trading out links with everyone who wants to give you a link, or if you find that somebody's giving you a link and you're like, oh, I'll link back to them, or you're doing outreach to domains and saying, hey, link to me and I'll link to you, that would be excessive link exchanges. And I would say avoid that. If you have a trusted group of partners, people you work with, companies you work with, agencies you work with, your vendor relationships, if you're a sale, or if you're an e-commerce website, those kinds of experiences, those kinds of partners are definitely worth taking your time to set up some link exchanges. You want them to succeed as part of your business as much as they want you to succeed. Large scale article marketing or guest posting campaigns. So some of you may be familiar with a lot of guest post service companies out there who claim we will get you 100 links a month, and the way that we do that is through guest posts. That would definitely be a violation of Webmaster guidelines. That's pretty large scale. If, however, you are taking the opportunity to do very targeted guest post campaigns where you are going to communities that are highly relevant to you and saying, hey, I have this great piece of content. I am willing to talk about data for the last year or my experience with XYZ event or something, highly relevant to you guys. And I would love to host that content here in exchange for a link. That on a one-off basis is fine. It's the large scale that makes it an issue. Using automated programs or services to create links to your site. That is pretty self-explanatory. Anything that's just going out and generating a link with absolutely no content associated, definitely an issue. And then the last is a little confusing. Requiring a link as part of a terms of service, contract, or similar arrangement without allowing a third-party content owner the choice of qualifying the outbound link should they wish. The scenarios in which this really takes place is if you enable what's called user-generated content on your website. So while that person is uploading content to you, they are technically the third-party content owner, or if they are somebody who is providing you with content for some other reason and or services, and you don't give them the option to either set a no follow or a no index rule on their link, or to just remove the link at first, then that's again a violation. So long as you give the opportunity, you're not in violation. These are my interpretations of the guidelines. They are strict, and I choose not to engage in tactics that would violate it. It risks domains, it risks businesses, and that is the reason why I am very specific about what I review here and what I choose to do with my link building. So the next question, of course, is, so what's a good link and how do I earn them? A good link follows these four things. It follows the guidelines, it points to a live page, it has relevant anchor text, and it comes from a relevant source. In order to build links, it is very simple. Be friendly, make great content, and always ask for a link. You'll notice one of the things in the Webmaster guidelines does not say that you can't just go around asking for links. You absolutely can, and there's no reason not to. The worst thing somebody says is no, and the best thing they do is just say yes and give you one. Somewhere in between is they ask you for some content, or they want to talk to you about why you want the link and where do you want it to go and what's the purpose of it and things like that. And you can help them to understand what the value and the benefit is to you. If you share, you'll get more. I've ended most of my SEO presentations for the last 10 years this way. This is really the best way to think about link building, is it is a community event. It is engaging with people on the internet, and it's basically just saying there's an opportunity for me to succeed by you helping me. And so, of course, I want to help you succeed. If you share, you'll get more. It's all really that simple, and I hope that this has been a helpful deep dive for you guys. Again, the three cores of SEO: content, technical, and link building. Congratulations, you are now dangerous. Is there a secret fourth core? The answer is yes, and I look forward to talking to you about it. If you would like a copy of the presentation, if you have any questions or looking for marketing services, please feel free to email me anytime, evan@logicinboun.com. You can, of course, also just type Evan Fishkin into a search engine of your choice. Odds are good you'll find your way to me.
Okay, thanks a lot, Evan. So let's have a look at some of these questions. So, there's a lot of questions that kind of overlap. I mean, I suppose one of the questions I would bring up, Evan, that's probably a bit more advanced, but might give some insight to people, will be around the recent uses of BERT in context with RankBrain, and how they're looking historically at stuff, but now also looking at these wider paragraphs and the segments in your video. So it becomes very important to really look at the long form content, the medium form content, and the short form content. So, you talked a lot there about, well, there's metadata and there's titles and answering questions. I absolutely 100% agree with you on a key part of modern SEO is being the answer. I think being the answer is it, just the three words that are just, I think, really, really important. But could you just talk about the impact that BERT and this kind of refocus on content is changing how even Logic Inbound approaches SEO?
Yeah. So I probably start a lot of my content work by looking at a SERP result for a target keyword. So for instance, if I want to rank for something along the lines of water heater repair, I will type in water heater repair, and then I will go through all of the basically output that Google is giving me about that terminology. They'll do things like give me featured snippets, they'll give me entity cards, they'll give me the people also ask, which helps me to figure out exactly what the searcher is looking for, both in the initial search and then the follow-up. And the Google suggestions, again, another great place to look at that. Follow each one of those out. And again, look for the featured snippets. Look for the information that Google is just feeding back to you. That is the output of all of that work they're putting into the semantic SLI, semantic latent indexing, and the paragraph analysis updates that they just rolled out. I want to say last month, but it might have been the first week of April, so it might still be this month. I having a hard time with keeping track of life these days. So all of that information is to say, take a look at the PAAs, take a look at the suggestions, and use those to inform your content. That is the information that will ultimately lead to you being the answer.
Yeah, I think I was on I think Rand was giving a live session about zero click and no click. And I think one of the things he was talking about was, could have been the vegan burger example or something like that. And he was saying that, you can learn a lot even from the product results that are coming up and seeing how people are crafting those product results. And I suppose related to the BERT update, I mean, how heavily should people focus on the Google algorithm updates and their impact on SEO efforts, or should they just, to a large extent, just continue doing, as you said, good content, technical SEO within the baseline levels, and then
Right.
obviously the third thing is the links. And I think the links are the more difficult part of all that equation.
Yeah. Well, so at the core of your question is, should I focus on the algorithm updates, or should I do what I think a user wants and work towards the user? So Google is constantly working towards a future where they are trying to instantly answer every query, regardless of complexity, with basically one answer, right? So you should think about what that future might look like, how it's going to get there, right? So we have things like schema.org to give us structured data, which will ultimately feed the classification that enables Google to do that in the future. So if you're not taking advantage of it, you will be left behind sometime. And I want to say in the next 5 years, it might be longer. I think it will be sooner. We've been talking about structured data for a long time. So when it comes to focusing on algorithm updates, the answer is there's definitely some updates that will have such a significant shift in how SEO is performed that you will have to pay attention to it. most of the most of the algorithm updates do not have a significant upset in the SEO industry. They affect each individual industry and sometimes verticals in small or different ways, and you may get hit by some of those. And you'll have to learn the intricacy of what the algorithm update did in order to figure out what you need to do to tweak towards that. But for the most part, most algorithm updates don't hit most people. You should work towards the user, not the updates. That being said, we all used to do keyword stuffing and link manipulation out the wazoo until the Florida update. So there are updates that will upset the entire industry.
Well, you've answered another question there, which was, would you focus on the user or would you optimize for Google? And I suppose focusing on the user is in one respect optimizing for Google. But you raised an interesting point there about schema. And I think that one of the questions there that I would have, and we get asked quite a lot, is do you recommend structured data code generators? And how much schema should you, or how many schema, I don't know what the plural of schema, because it's schema should you use on any given page?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it is less about using as much schema as possible and more about using those schemas that are relevant to the potential output. So we looked at some of the featured snippets today, and we saw that schema is used for things like events, job postings, locations, recipes. Not all schemas currently have a database output that shows as a featured snippet. Not all of them are currently showing in search engine result pages in such a way as to have a great impact. There are thousands of schema and only a dozen featured snippet types. It's important to note that, and if you're going to go do schema, don't try to be exhaustive, be predictive. Understand what it is you want to achieve with it, and then pick the schemas that are appropriate to it.
I think that just to run that on then a bit, I think that one of the things that I see is whether they're students or they're entrepreneurs or startups, or they've got consultants or something, what they say, oh, look, I've put in structured data. And then I look at the structured data and it's the baseline organization, it's a URL. Often they describe their content as creative works, which I always kind of a bit worried when someone describes a commercial page as a creative work. But I do think it's really important that, it's an interesting thing you point about recipes. We work with Safe Food quite a lot, and they had 140 recipes 2 Christmases ago. They're a national health agency for food. And we moved all their content into structured data for recipes, and they could see the impact immediately. And I think recipes is one of the great things. If you're in food or you're a restaurant or something like that, there's this great thing. Oh. But, it is very important to have relevant schema on your page, not just the generic schema. And yeah. You didn't really say it, but it goes back to this thing when you really dig down into the Google internal moderator guidelines. They have this thing about every page must have a purpose. And actually your schema really reflects that purpose. And people will put random stuff in. That's why you don't have duplicate headings and duplicate metadata, because what you're saying is it's like reading a book where every single page has the same title and same page number. It's different content, but it looks like you don't care. Yeah. I think that's the crime there. I remember way back in the day. This is terrible. You can tell your mom that I think when Evan's mom ran Moz, she used to have a slide about query deserves freshness. Yeah. And the whole point was that actually you should be refreshing your data all the time. Even if you change a small amount of that content, it's important. Changing the date makes no difference. Actually, I think Mueller, one of the guys in charge of search quality, came out last week and said, look, changing your date's going to make no difference. But if you update the content genuinely, we'll see that because of BERT, because it's going to look at a paragraph and it's going to update that. So you should be looking at that. But just to answer the question, structured data code generators, I think they're useful. I think that's a
Definitely, yeah. Anything that'll automate the structured data input for you is definitely worth doing, even if it's not doing some of the more complex stuff.
Yeah.
Anything that'll get you started in the process, I'm for.
Yeah. Okay, so here's another one. And actually, I think this is a pretty good question. You kind of hinted at this as well. Obviously, in May now, we're going to have Core Web Vitals. Okay. It's funny you were giving that example. I had exactly the same experience a couple of weeks ago with a client where they had these animated images, and one image was going it was weird. They had a horizontal and a vertical thing, and the CLS score was just gone. It was just dead, you know. And I was like, oh my God. And the other thing is this tendency to have quite large images or not optimize the images, and things like Squoosh and things really make that easy to have your images sorted. I mean, the Google page load tools really tell you exactly what you need to do, and it's free, and you don't have to pay people. It's like simple things. But how worried should people be about the Core Web Vitals update? They are limited resources, and they're dependent on Shopify. And I know myself, Shopify, I think it's a great tool for small business. It gets you up and running. It's an awful pig half the time when it comes to page load speeds. The CSS has so much crap built into it that just is useless, and you can't really edit it unless you want to spend a massive amount of money. I don't know. I'll let you answer first, and then I'll answer and see whether we match up.
We have a number of clients who use what I like to call the all-in-one solutions, right? Yeah. They're running their entire business out of Shopify or Wix.
And Wix,
Wix is so much worse. No, that's the real can of worms. If you're on Wix, move quickly. The Shopify issues are numerous. It started way back years ago. They used to have robots.txt standards that were applied to every shop, and you had no control over them. And one of the things that it was consistently doing is it would start to request de-indexation for product pages if a category page had all of the product pages, or if you set up a new product page for promotional, but then you didn't take down the promotional. So the original product page would have a requested robots.txt de-index. That's a huge issue. And it was so constant. And tons of SEOs were flooding Shopify with like, I have this client who will not, move. Would you please fix this for me? And no, they didn't do anything for a long time. So the same issue will occur again for Core Web Vitals. I look forward to seeing your angry emails. Again, if you're all-in-one, please move quickly.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, well, I don't think you can move, but I think you need to address as much optimization as you can, because Core Web Vitals is a core update. There's no appeal on this. It's going to impact everyone, and I think very few websites are now not mobile first, and you need to be up there in the 80-85 scores on Core Web Vitals to really be doing well, and they're going to penalize you. And the funny thing is, you won't even know that you're being penalized. Now the only thing is, search is a relative technology. So all the other people who are using all-in-one stores are probably having the same experience. There are worse platforms than Shopify, Wix, and Magento can be a real pig for if you're based on that. So so that's a big challenge for people. And that's just to give you 2 weeks. So it's not that far out.
You heard it here first, folks.
Well, yeah, I would say, about the core updates, I think finding a source that tells you whether an update is important or not is well worth it. So I think Search Engine Journal do a pretty good job with saying, this is an update that you need to worry about, or this is an update you don't need to worry about. But equally, I would say Moz will do the same thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can try and work through what Google's telling you or not telling you, or you can try other things. Here's a question, a bit unfair given your background. Moz versus Ahrefs versus SEMrush.
Oh no. So here's my diplomatic answer. Oh, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So for user experience, I genuinely love Moz. That being said, they have a lot of shortcomings they're still working on. In terms of data, all three of them basically have the same. One of the things that I've seen that's very interesting recently is Ahrefs is working towards getting data by using Search Console verification with user permission. And I think that'll be really interesting. If they can get enough people to opt into that, they're going to be, I think, one of the more central sources for traffic level data by industry going forward. SEMrush is, as far as I'm aware, they are number one across the world. They are really the cream of the crop selection for tools for SEOs. So I would say if I were to recommend just off the cuff, I have no idea what you're trying to accomplish, my first recommendation is SEMrush.
Okay, good stuff. Other than the cost.
Yeah.
Okay, I tell you a bugbear that I think people have, and it's a real challenge, is I find, again, when we do projects, whether with students or SMEs, we transition up, it's very easy to do the content. Well, it's very easy to do the content, not necessarily do 10x content or really good content, but it's easy to do content. They get the content idea. They get the technical SEO idea, because the technical SEO, it's like a checklist. The linking, the backlinking is just, there's a couple of things. It's what I would call, it's the salesman side of SEO, and it is, and I know going back a large time, I remember myself, Sean Donnelly and Rosemary went to visit you in Indianapolis back in the day, and we spent a long time talking about this one topic with putting in the ask, and I think that any insights into that particular, for me, I think it's done badly, and I think people are scared to really get to grips with it. And any great insights there on how to get high quality links?
Yes. So this is where I'm going to do my shameless plug. SparkToro is an amazing tool for incredible link building, mostly because SparkToro is focused around enabling you to create relationships with the influencers and users you're targeting. SparkToro does an amazing job of basically, you throw in a target industry of what you're looking for, and it will spit back everybody who's involved in that. Where they are, how active they are, and what you can do to kind of reach out and address their profiles. That is absolutely the best way to do link building. No website exists as like an autonomous matrix robot. They're run by people. So if you're trying to get a link, you have to end up with the person. It's a human interaction that's ultimately going to take place to get you a link. You may find some websites that are like, oh, you could insert a comment with a link, or you can just set up a generic profile. Some of those websites might be valuable links, few and far between, I would imagine. And even worse is, the more you do it, the more other people will be able to recognize those patterns. Ultimately, Google will recognize the pattern, and they'll just devalue the whole damn thing. So again, you're back to, oh, now I have to go build real links. So I highly recommend tools like SparkToro, where you can find a way to interact with the human aspect of any website and say, I am looking for a link. I will do anything to get this link. Tell me what you want.
I do think you can't avoid the hard work on it, though, because ultimately, what do people share? What will people link to is really good content. That's what they're looking for. If it's really good content, you're going to tell someone about that content. And you're going to look for the new content. It doesn't necessarily need to look the best, although that's a good thing, but it needs to be good. I think that's really, really, really important. Here's another one, just some quick ones, because I know we're running out of time. I think it's more of a website development issue. How do I add breadcrumbs if it's not supported by the theme I'm using? Is that just a matter of downloading it?
Man. No, you didn't give me enough information. Whoever asked this, I'm so sorry. This is, please reach out to me personally, Evan at Logic Inbound. I will work with you to solve this, because yes, this is a terrible situation you've walked yourself into. I assume, since you're using the words dedicated plugin and theme, I'm assuming you're on WordPress.
Yeah.
If you have a theme that does not currently include and or support backlinks, sorry, not backlinks, breadcrumbs, the answer is yes. There are one-off dedicated plugins that will enable it into a theme. More than likely, though, what you need to do is switch themes. It sounds like the theme you're on, if it can't support breadcrumbs, it doesn't support other things that might be more critical. I would be very concerned and take a look at some other options.
I think the answer there, just, is again, it's like the Shopify situation. If SEO is important for your business, you need to take care on picking your theme, and saying, oh, it's free or it's only $20. Spend $50 or $100, $200 and get a theme that does everything that you need it to do. There's a follow on here: Moz versus Ahrefs versus SEO. It's what about Screaming Frog?
Apples and oranges, in my opinion. So if you're using any of those three tools for crawl to evaluate your website, this is where I'm really going to hit some folks. Okay, if you are doing technical crawls of your website on a regular basis, Screaming Frog is the best way to go about it. Moz has a decent crawler with a really great user-friendly and white labelable, I hope that's how you say that, report. They're fantastic for that. Ahrefs and SEMrush have terrible crawlers. Don't use them. Don't export those reports. Do not send them to clients. Do not send them to your bosses. They have errors. I cannot tell you how many times people come to me with an Ahrefs report and they're like, oh, Ahrefs says I have all of these problems. And I'm like, well, yes, you have canonical tags on your pages. I am glad Ahrefs noticed that.
I think the answer that, one of the things I get a lot is people putting three different measures for the same, to make the same point. They'll go to Search Console and they'll get their data, and then they'll run a mobile page test, and then they'll take something from Gmetrics and they'll stick it all on one page. And I'm kind of going, look, you only need one, okay? And now I'm asking questions about why are these different. And what I'm always saying to people is, and I'm glad you look, it doesn't really matter what Evan says, and it doesn't really matter what Theo says. It just matters what Google thinks. So, yes. The source here is whatever's in Google Search Console. And I make that point very clearly. It's whatever's in the primary Google Search Console interface, not necessarily, don't read it from your analytics. Your Google Analytics is a summary of what's in the main Google Search Console. And it's whatever they say is the answer. And you can analyze that to death, but effectively that's the best advice I can give. But when you're thinking about some of these things, I think people, there's a couple of things here. Don't boil the ocean as well, because for the majority of SMEs, having tons of spreadsheets and trying to work out all these things is just going to take up loads of time that you could spend writing good content and getting your email marketing or something right, So we'll leave it at this. Well, actually, there's two questions here. Okay. I saw one there. Someone said something along the lines of when should you expect to see results from SEO? And the answer is not fast.
No, it's typically a longer timeline. So if you're talking, when you say results, that's of course a whole other conversation, which is what is a result to you? For me and for my clients, I always say a result is money earned. Revenue is the only key performance indicator. So with that regard, most of our SEO campaigns see success somewhere between 3 months to as much as a year down the line. It depends on how long it takes for you to get your website up to snuff, how long it takes for you to develop content, and then how long it takes for you to build relationships to promote that content. All three of those things are basically the timeline that you can set yourself against. If you have people that can work on each one in tandem and go quickly, you'll see results quickly.
Yeah, a good way to think about that is look at your peer benchmark reports and analytics, see what the search volume for your size of business, for your sector and country is. Get to that point and then move up to the next level. You know what I mean? Because I think that's the challenge, is that what is success? You know, so what metrics do I success? I don't know. We don't know what business. You know, if you ask someone like Evan, it's like depends who my client is. You know what I mean? So I see we've hit our time. So like usual, I'd probably run slightly over, but I could spend all day talking to Evan about SEO. So
I can cancel my meetings. Let's do this.
Yeah, do you know what? I'll get into trouble for running on or something.
Oh, okay,
like
all right.
So yeah, but you know what, Evan, we'll have to come back and do a Theo and Evan roadshow.
I would love it.
Apart from anything, everyone would like to see you contradict me. So yeah, people love getting people to tell Theo's wrong.
Okay.
So before wrapping up, I'd like to thank Evan for taking the time to give us a really insightful, interesting talk. I've never managed to deliver my SEO workshops. I think are now running at 4 or 5 hours long. So he did a great job introducing that. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for all the questions. GETDigital will be continuing with our final session of the day at 5 o'clock with Jerry Duffy, the motivational speaker. If you want to hear someone who's run 30 marathons in 30 days and 10 Ironmans in 10 days, he's a phenomenal guy. I can only encourage you to tune in. I always get something from him. Listen, I'd like to thank you for tuning in and thank Evan for participating. See you now. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.